you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
Welcome back to America Trends. Larry Rifkin and John Kropsic. And we've done a lot on the environment, have we not, John?
We sure have.
I'm interrogating you. Have we not? Yes, we have.
We've had NASA scientists. We've had...
oh, yeah, we were talking, not scientists, but we did talk about the space program. Yeah. And that podcast was out of this world. It really was. And then, of course, we've talked a lot about our own planet and how imperiled it seems to be these days. There's a new book out by Mike Berners-Lee, and I love the title, There Is No Planet B. You know, the whole idea.
True, yeah.
Well, I'm going to move everybody over to Mars, and we can say, you know, we just junked this planet, and we used it up, all the resources, and now we're moving along.
And it only takes a year or so to get to Mars, and
yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
And by the time you get there, you're going to be pretty hungry.
There's no oxygen.
Yeah, you're going to be hungry, too. And by the way, I'm sorry, this is a one-way flight.
Yes.
Did you know that? Well, at any rate, what's really interesting about this book, because we did one with David Wallace Wells about the uninhabitable planet. And, you got to go back and listen to that. The book got a lot of attention, and we got him right when the book came out. And it's podcast number, fill in the blank, whatever it is. Just look it up on our site, or Apple, or Google, or Spotify, or our network. I mean, any of those. But this book is very practical. And when I talked to Mike, as you recall, he was not, alarmist in any way, though he's very clear that there is a present danger as it relates to the environment. But he was giving us a lot of practical ideas as to what we can do.
Well, and I'm glad to see some towns, not all of them, and even some stores are beginning to wake up and get rid of the single-use plastic bags. And, we got to get all this plastic out of our lives. It's made with oil that we only have so much of. So there is a little underground movement going on.
Absolutely. I hate to tell you, though, what I'm doing in that regard, because, look, I am very responsible. I recycle, though now we're being told, and we had C.J. May on talking about recycling. He's wonderful from previously from Yale and now for the city of Waterbury, Connecticut. But I'm reading where a lot of that stuff is going into incineration regardless, because the Chinese are not buying our stuff because the stuff we put into recycling is so contaminated. They're saying it's not even worth it.
Well, I think that's a little retaliation for the tariffs, but I mean that's what I think that's all about.
But now what are we doing with it?
Well, I really think we got to step up our recycling in this country. I mean, we're depending on China to take our junk, to ship it out so they can send us junk back. It's time for us to to step up and we really should get rid of the things out of our life, like the plastic bottles and the stuff,
plastic straws.
Plastic, let's get rid of this plastic. We really don't need it. There's ways around it.
No, you're absolutely right. But what's interesting is, John, and I hate to admit this, but I'm becoming a hoarder of those little bags because we use them to line certain waste baskets, and I know that in about a month they're going to cost 10 cents.
Right.
And within a year or two, they're all going to be gone. So now I am stockpiling them, but not to get them into the ocean or the lakes. They will all go into the garbage.
Right.
I don't know what I'm going to line my waste baskets with.
Yeah. Well, they'll come up with something.
Okay. Reusable?
Something. They'll figure out something.
All right. Well, Why am I bothering our audience with this? I don't know. But this gentleman, Mike Berners-Lee, is really, really interesting. And he writes and he researches sustainability and responses to some of the challenges in the 21st century, food production. And he's got a hopeful sense about him, even though he's telling us in the subtitle to the book that this is a handbook for the make or break years. And a lot of people tell us that this is the moment, and we don't have a lot of time, and there is no planet B. That's what we learned today.
There is no planet B. That's
absolutely. Here on America Trends. With us on the line is Mike Berners-Lee. There is no planet B, a handbook for the make or break years. Come on, I thought that Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos could just ship us all, almost free because of Amazon, ship us to another planet. That's not right?
That's absolutely not right. Actually, if you do some basic physics on this, you find that the energy required to go off to the nearest planet that could be anything like worth living on is just so enormous that there's no way it's going to be happening.
Okay, so we are committed.
For the next few generations.
Okay, so we're committed to this place.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an important thing to say, actually, because we've all been brought up on Star Trek and science fiction films where we see people traveling through space, and it's kind of easy to assume that in the end that's what we'll be doing. But if we are ever going to be doing that, it's not going to be for many generations to come.
You welcome us to the anthropocene. Can you explain this very important concept as we launch into saving this planet for our habitation? What is the anthropocene?
Yeah, okay. So it's a big word for a very simple concept, really. So all it means is it's the era that we've just entered in which the big thing that affects the planet is humans. It's us. And that's a really recent thing that's happened. So for centuries or millennia, humans have been getting more and more powerful. We've been increasing our energy supply, and we've been using that energy to do all kinds of different things, including to dig more energy out of the ground, more minerals out of the ground, to create chemicals, to do all sorts of stuff. And for a long time, the world was still, our planet A was still a really robust place, and it could kind of recover from anything that we did. Even 100 years ago, it could recover from everything that we could throw at it. And 50 years ago, it was clear that actually, if we really made a mess, had a nuclear war or something, we could make the whole world, just about make the whole world uninhabitable. But now it's not like that anymore. Unless we're really careful, we will now make the world uninhabitable. And that's a brand new situation for us to be in. And it requires us to behave completely differently.
You also wrote a book, or co-wrote a book, called The Burning Question. We can't burn half the world's oil, coal, and gas, so how do we quit? How important is what you were talking about in that book to inform the process of No Planet B and what we've got to do now, and your updating of your thinking about environmental issues affecting us?
Well, the burning question is, climate change is still a huge symptom of our arrival in the Anthropocene without knowing how to deal with it. So climate change is even a lot more pressing than we thought it was when we wrote The Burning Question. And we are we understated it in this outline. Underneath it, we sort of said we can't burn half the world's fossil fuel. Actually, we can't burn a tenth of the world's fossil fuel. We can't even burn, we can only burn a very small proportion of the world's fossil fuel. And since The Burning Question came out, the science has got clearer and it's got more alarming. And we've had another 7 years of humans doing nothing whatsoever to deal with climate change. So when we wrote The Burning Question in 2013, we talked about exponentially rising carbon emissions that were rising exactly as if humans had never noticed that climate change was an issue we should deal with. And now, 7 years later on, the latest data tells us, you know what? That carbon curve is still going up exactly as it would have done if humans had never noticed that climate change was an issue we had to deal with. So we need to, I'm not saying this to be depressing, I'm saying this because understanding that what we're doing so far is not any part of the solution tells us a lot about what we might need to do to actually solve the problem. Because I think we can, but we need to understand that we need to change our game and raise our game Otherwise, we won't get that.
You do say that climate change isn't our only tangible environmental problem. I mean, obviously there are others, but what else compares, if anything does?
Biodiversity could easily hit us, just as hard or harder than climate change. All these things interlink with each other.
Yes.
So also closely linked to climate change, because it's also caused by carbon dioxide emissions, is ocean acidification, which could lead to destruction of the world's sea life. We've got a host of other things that could be brewing for us. So some people think of biodiversity as just kind of, it's nice to have lots of wild animals running around. Actually, it's a lot more central to human existence than that. So, for example, we're hearing some quite scary science of insect populations now, and those insects are actually essential for the way that our edible crops grow, for example. One of the things about all these challenges that we're facing, there's possibly an antibiotics challenge coming up as well, but we really don't know exactly which of these is going to hit us hardest, or whether it's going to be one that we haven't even noticed yet. So the big thing to understand is that we are such a powerful species now, and our planet is just so delicate compared to everything we can do to it. And we do all these things by a mixture of accident and design, and we like to think of ourselves as the kind of all-knowing species that's in control of it all. And actually, we don't have anything like the understanding of what causes what that we need to have in this fragile world. So we need to slow down and just be an awful lot more thoughtful.
Well, you offer us a lot of questions to ponder in this book, There Is No Planet B, but you do say, here goes. This book is geared towards a future along these lines. The air is fresher, life is healthier, longer, more relaxed, more fun, and more exciting. Our diets are varied, tasty, and healthy. More of us get out as much as we want to, both socially and physically. Travel is easier. Now, you're talking about things that we think the modern age has given to us in many ways, and yet you are saying that we don't have to give up things like airplanes and hamburgers. I mean, how do we look at this place? Because a lot of people who are looking at climate change saying the life going forward is going to have to be very different, rather draconian, more sterile, but that's not the place you're talking about.
No, I'm not talking about a more sterile, draconian world at all. I'm talking about a world in which more of us spend more time feeling more free about living our lives in whatever ways we find meaningful to us. It does entail facing up to some responsibilities. So there will be some areas in which we need to hold back a bit. And we all live our lives within constraints, and there are one or two areas where those constraints are going to get larger, but there are lots of areas where we can actually take away some of the constraints and live in a way that's more free. So just to look at the constraints first, you mentioned two of them there. So on the one hand, it's true that we're going to need to be more frugal with our flying for probably the next few decades. And that's just a hard reality. It's one of the hardest realities we have to face around dealing with climate change, and that's just because we don't yet know how to put aeroplanes up in the air for long-haul flights without creating a lot of emissions. And until we crack that one, we're going to have to be really careful with it. And the other constraint that you mentioned, well, arguably a constraint, is that we need to change our diets a bit. So the world needs to eat not no meat and dairy, but less meat and dairy. Mm-hmm. And the science of that is just absolutely clear-cut. But it's not really going to be a cause of suffering. Most people stand to, by changing their diet somewhat, most people have an opportunity to live longer and more healthily, and almost all of us will find, as we start to change our habits a bit, that our tastes will change as well. So meal choices that might feel alien now are things that we'll get used to, and we'll learn to look forward to, and we'll find ourselves wanting and feeling better about than some of our existing diets.
You have a whole chapter on food, and you ask a lot of really interesting questions. One that I had never thought of: why don't more people explode from overeating? I'd never thought about that, Mike.
Okay, well, so around the world there's a net surplus of human nutrition that's being eaten. On average, we're eating a few hundred calories a day more than we actually need to. And if you do the sums on that, if you were to eat even 50 calories a day, more than the energy you used up, it would only be a few years before you got so big that you couldn't get up out of a chair at all. And it would probably be about a couple of decades until you died of it. But so if you can call it this, the good news is that if as a human body gets overweight, it gets less efficient and it starts to burn through more food just to do everyday things. So that's the reason why we don't explode.
Okay, and there are so many wonderful questions here. For example, what are the carbon footprints of different foods? Is that something that we're going to see? We see caloric intake at times. Are we going to see something on foods at some point to help us understand the impact?
Yeah, I hope we will. Not numbers specifically, because it's very hard to be exact about it. But I'd like to see a traffic light system that just lets us know about some of the simple and some very simple guidance. So if a person wants to have a more sustainable diet, then there's about 3 or 4 simple rules to follow. And if they follow them, then they will be eating a dramatically more sustainable diet than the average person. So that's just less meat and dairy, and especially less beef and lamb. And you don't have to cut it to 0, and it doesn't have to be done all in one go. But over the next few years, just change your diet away from beef, lamb, and also away from the other meats and dairies as well. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it's so simple, but just to eat everything that we buy and learn not to waste food anymore. And the third thing is to do away with air-freighted food. For the same reason that we need to be frugal with our flying. And if you just follow those 3 rules, and if supermarkets could put a traffic light system on foods just to let you know whether foods are red, orange, or green, then that's probably all we need to get most of the way.
What about you kind of answered it when you said just to cut back, but should I go veggie or vegan, which is one of the questions that you ponder in the book?
Yeah, we don't need to go all the way. It's just about proportions, and we don't even need to do it overnight. We just need to do it over the next few years. So if you're somebody who just feels like a meal is not a meal unless it's got a slab of steak in it, then just try it once or twice and see what happens. Try it once a week. Learn about the choice of non-meat options that are available now. I mean, so I live in the UK. I'm not quite sure how it's changing in the US, but certainly in the UK, the quality of vegetarian food and the ease with which you find it is just going up and up in an extraordinary way. So you can, now in the UK, you can go to a restaurant, you can be sitting down looking at the menu, you see all these exciting things you could eat that you never even dreamed of, and it's only after a few minutes that you notice, hey, you know what, I haven't got any meat choices here. It happens to be all vegetarian, and they don't even mention it because they don't need to. So the world of the world of food beyond meat and dairy is just really getting exciting and varied, and chefs are learning how.
No, I understand. You may not want to come to the U.S. because you'll see all these steakhouses and all kinds of. But the book is called "There Is No Planet B: A Handbook for the Make or Break Years." Mike Berners-Lee. And Mike, with this book, and you have chapters on climate and environment, energy, travel, and transport, and we'll dig into a couple of those things. But I just had David Wallace Wells on, The Uninhabitable Planet, and he talks about the fact that he thinks the message about climate change has been very poorly communicated. What do you think, and what are you trying to do with this book to help us understand these make or break years and our role in making this planet sustainable?
Well, he's right that climate change has been badly explained, badly articulated. I think, I take my hat off to the scientific community. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been presenting these incredibly thoughtful and detailed pieces of science. But where they've got it wrong is that they've hoped that just by doing that they'll win the argument. And actually humans haven't worked like that. And we've needed to be absolutely clear with the facts, but it's also important that we present them in a way which people understand how serious it is and what they can do about it. And we need to see a big global system change. That's about how we think about life, how we think about the economy, how we think about jobs, how we treat each other, the respect with which we treat each other all around the world, the way in which we insist on a culture of truth, all of us in our politics, in our business life, in our home lives. Humans need to raise their game in a very big way. And we'll enjoy life more the closer we get. As we make that transition, I'm sure we'll find that life feels richer, it's more enjoyable, and we'll know that we're doing the right thing. And we need to make it clear that the process of making that change can be fun, but it's also serious, and it's partly about kind of living sustainable lifestyles. But even more importantly, or just as importantly, it's about how we push in every way we can for the change that we need to see. So we need to push our politicians, we need to push our businesses, we need to not let it go. If we find ourselves in a room with somebody who's talking as though climate change doesn't matter, in any context, we need to learn not to let it go, because we've absolutely got to get on top of this.
Well, Mike, I like the sunny side of the egg. I mean, I really do. Having said that, you're looking at an intractable problem in the UK right now. We're looking at a government that is highly questionable at the moment in the U.S., and you tell us that some of our actions to date have had zero detectable impact on global emissions. We pulled out of the climate accord. Lots of people are showing only scorn for the Green New Deal. I mean, are we at a point, because there are those who are saying, time is almost up for us here if we don't deal with this within 12 to 15 years. And when I look at the political leadership available to us at this moment in time, I have little confidence that we're moving in that direction at all.
Yeah, so I'm with you. We're a long way away, right? But so why am I so chirpy? Well, I'm so chirpy because it's not proven that we can't deal with this, right? So I'm not optimistic in the sense of, everything's going to be fine. I'm optimistic in the sense of it's not proven that we can't deal with this. So I agree with you. On both sides of the Atlantic, the politics is in a complete mess, and most of the politicians are inadequate for the situation that we're in. They are inadequate for the Anthropocene, and we need to see the game raised a very long way. However, I'm talking about a big system change, and at the moment we're locked into an old system that's unfit for purpose. That's why we're seeing the carbon curve carrying on in its normal way, because it's a self-correcting system. If you push it a little bit in one place, it has a way of adjusting itself so that global emissions carry on rising as they always have done, and so on. But when you're looking for system change, sometimes you can push and push and push in a system. It looks like nothing you can do will shift it. And then suddenly the conditions become right, and then suddenly you can get a very rapid system flip. And that's what we need to see. And I think now you can see some things happening that might be the first cracks in the old system that might be able to lead in a very short space of time to a very big change. And so the things that give me hope, and this is the kind of hope that in a way I didn't have 7 years ago when the burning question came out. The things that give me hope are the traction that the Green New Deal is getting now. So not everybody goes with it, but it's getting a lot more traction than it would have had even a couple of years ago, maybe, or even 1 year ago. And then in this country, for all the terrible things that are going on in our politics, we have one or two really smart, what I would call anthropocene fit MPs, and we have the kids going on strike in their thousands right across Europe and in the US as well. We have city and county councils up and down the country declaring climate emergencies. We have Extinction Rebellion in the nicest, most thoughtful way, taking direct, non-violent action in our cities, bringing the traffic to a halt and just explaining to everybody, I'm really sorry to inconvenience you, but we just have to have a better world here. And I think the momentum that those sorts of changes are happening, that those sorts of actions are bringing about, it's hopeful, and I don't know if it's enough. It's not enough yet, but if we all push hard, I'm thinking, well, maybe we can get there now.
Very briefly, the chapter is about energy and travel and transport, because those are the things that oftentimes we think we're going to have to change. The way that we heat our homes, various things that we need to do in terms of our modes of transportation, electric vehicles, and the like. Are those two areas where you think we can really offer people some great alternatives?
The good news is that from a technical point of view, actually there are no problems. I'm not saying they're not interesting technical challenges, but we can transform our energy system, we can transform our transport system with the one difficulty of aviation, really. All of these things are doable. But the problem is that human energy supply is going up at the moment at 2.4% per year. And if we just have the renewable energy on top of the fossil fuel, it won't do us any good. So we need to find a way of stopping the growth on that energy supply so that when we grow the renewable energy, it replaces the fossil fuel. So we need to get used to a different way of operating in which we're not always having a bit more than we had the year before in a material sense. And that requires us to wire ourselves in a different way and think in a different way.
In terms of transportation, what are the changes that you'd like to see people in their own lives make today, or just encourage more walkable cities, more biking, the use of these alternative vehicles? What do you think we can do most importantly ourselves now?
Okay, so at the individual level, there are two things that people need to think about. One is the amount that you fly. So for some people it doesn't matter at all because they don't fly at all, but if you're a frequent flyer, then it's probably the one thing in terms of your transport that you absolutely need to get your head around because it's so impactful. And then the other thing is our driving, and that is about the amount that we drive, and it's what kind of car we drive, and it's the style in which we drive it, and it's can we get an electric car? So those are the things at the individual level. Then at the kind of at the national level, there are big investment questions like the infrastructure of cities, how cities are built. These are much harder to change, but the ideal city is one in which the kids can walk between their friends' houses, and you can stroll down the street between the cafes and the shops, and you can walk to work, and you can cycle to work, and all these things, and you're never more than a mile or two from some beautiful countryside because the city itself is so compact. And I know from time in Silicon Valley, for example, a lot of that has been built in the many American cities have been built in a way that actually makes travel without using the car for everything really difficult. And that's such a shame because the truth of it is hard to re-engineer.
Absolutely. Mike Berners-Lee. There is no planet B. Okay, so we got that, and we're certain about that. A handbook for the make or break years. Very interesting reading, folks. And he talks about people and work, business and technology, and thinking skills for today's world. Talks even about money and growth and how we can accomplish that while changing a lot of the approaches that we take to modern day life so that we can sustain this planet, Planet A, and the only planet available to us. Thank you, Mike, for being with us today on America Trends.
Pleasure.
You're listening to America Trends Podcast, and we're part of the Mental Health News Radio Network at mhnrnetwork.com.